guilty to counts 13, 15, 16, 17, and 18. In total, he's facing 50 years of initial confinement, 35 years of extended supervision. State, go ahead with your sentencing arguments.
Thank you, Your Honor. Appreciate the court's time here this afternoon. I did file a written submission last week with some additional information in a letter dated November 15th of 2024. Has the court received that?
The court did receive it. The court did review it. And I'll leave it at that. I won't do any editorials. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Your Honor, I just want to comment a little bit more about the facts of this case and the investigation as it's unraveled here over about the last 11 months or so. So, as the court knows, when the original complaint was filed in this case, it was very shortly after the incident had occurred, about a week later. Mr. Vincent himself had some medical issues and was hospitalized for a period of time, and that was why there was a delay between the incident and his initial appearance. But since that time, as I've indicated, Your Honor, over the course of about the last 11 months, this has been an ongoing investigation and ongoing review of the incident itself and of Mr. Vincent and his conduct in the Waukesha County Jail. And I'd like to comment on some of that, Your Honor. I'd like to ask the court permission if I could please put something up on the screen. I'd like to show a brief video to the court, please.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
Give my clerk a moment to get that connected.
Sure. Oh, and I have okay. Your Honor, while your clerk's doing that, can you confirm that we do have a victim on the Zoom call?
Yeah, we actually have 4 different people observing on Zoom. I don't know who you're looking for, but I have someone noted as mom. And then I have last name of Williams, last name of Briggs, and last name of Hargrove.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I believe the person indicated as mom would be the mother of victim B, who's appearing on Zoom from her home in Minnesota. The others, I'm not aware of their identity. Okay. So, Your Honor, if I could ask you to direct your attention to the screen, and I'm sure the court is probably aware, can you go to the next slide, please, Ms. Silvey, aware of the location where this incident occurred. But essentially, the crash occurred right in the driveway to what was the old town hall for town of Delafield. Now it houses their highway department. And so this is just an overview of the crash scene to help the court orient itself to where the incident occurred. Next slide, please. I'd like to display this video to the court, which is really a capturing the travel during the time of the pursuit. So again, you can see, Your Honor, I-94 is along the bottom edge of the photo, and then it's the intersection of Gulf Road and Prospect Avenue where the pursuit begins. So as I understand the situation, Your Honor, oops, pause it, please, it's playing. Deputy Braun of the Sheriff's Department was set up to a location just west of here. It's not actually shown on this still shot at this point. He was set up, it'd be on the left side of this screen to the west of, that's just on the far left side of the screen at this point is the driveway. On the north side of I-94 is the driveway going into Orthopedic Associates of Wisconsin. And that's the golf course right behind it there. So Deputy Braun was set up in this location just to the west of Orthopedic Associates. There's a turnaround in the concrete barrier of the interstate for law enforcement and emergency vehicles. He was in a stationary position. He was facing southbound and watching the traffic coming from his right going left or headed eastbound into Milwaukee. And it's about 11:30, 11:45 at night. As he's sitting there, he has his headlights on and his overhead, his very bright lights on. So he wasn't hiding in the dark like running radar like you sometimes see law enforcement officers doing. He was very visually observable. And the reason he was doing that is he was watching for traffic violations, namely tinted windows and expired registration plates and things like that. At this time of day, it was a weekday, and it was, like I said, 11:30 at night. Certainly there's traffic out there, but not heavy traffic by any means. Deputy Braun advised that the first thing that drew his attention to this vehicle was its high rate of speed. As he sat there, he could see the defendant's vehicle approaching at a high rate of speed. And as the defendant went past Deputy Braun, at that point, Deputy Braun could observe the window tint to be at a level that was illegal. And he also could observe as the vehicle passed that there was no rear license plate. Before Deputy Braun could really do anything, he pulls out to pursue the vehicle, but did not at that point activate his red and blue lights or turn on his siren. He simply pulled out from the turnaround to, follow the defendant's vehicle. The defendant was originally traveling in the far left lane, the innermost lane by the concrete barrier. And as soon as the deputy pulled out behind him, the defendant made a maneuver, instantly crossing all 3 lanes of traffic and exiting at Prospect Avenue. And that was, again, not at the direction of the officer. The officer had not activated any emergency equipment. The officer thought this was suspicious. In fact, he noted to dispatchers that he thought the vehicle was trying to duck him or, basically avoid law enforcement. The officer follows him up the off-ramp, and Mr. Vincent, on his own, turns left and travels north on Prospect Avenue until he comes to stop at the intersection there of Prospect Avenue and Gulf Road. There's a stoplight there. And Mr. Vincent positioned his vehicle in the left-hand turn lane as if he were going to turn left and travel back westbound on Gulf Road. Deputy Braun, again, thinking that there's something weird going on with this car, this maneuver of crossing 3 lanes, quickly jumping off the freeway, he thought that was suspicious, so he immediately called for backup. And he knew that Deputy McManigal was working nearby in Pewaukee, and asked Deputy McManigal to start heading in that direction. So what you're going to see in this video, Your Honor, as you can see the legend at the bottom of the video, is the location of the defendant's vehicle, which is depicted in red, the location of Deputy Braun's squad in blue, and the location of Deputy McManigal in light blue. This data comes from the squad cars. The Sheriff's Department squad cars are outfitted with GPS locators. And then the victim C, who was in the front passenger seat of the defendant's car, through a download of her phone, we were able to obtain her location services and the data showing the movement of her phone as she was in the front seat of the car. So you could see that Deputy McManigal came from Waukesha, from the east, and came westbound up Gulf Road. And that's why you see his light blue tracking starting on the far right of the photograph there. And he comes up to Prospect Avenue at the intersection, hangs a left to travel southbound, and he's basically going to do a turnaround. He's going to come southbound down Prospect and turn around at the intersection and get in behind where the defendant is in the lead, and then Deputy Braun's vehicle, and then Deputy McManigal's vehicle. So that's why you see Deputy McManigal's vehicle showing up at this stage in the video over there on Gulf Road. Deputy Braun told investigators that while he was waiting, he waited for Deputy McManigal. Again, he was suspicious of this vehicle and thought there's something going on here that this guy's trying to avoid me. So he waited outside his squad for Deputy McManigal to get there before he approached the car. And basically, as soon as Deputy McManigal turned left from Gulf Road onto Prospect Avenue and was driving by, Deputy Braun, presumably thinking, okay, he's here, I'm going to make my approach to the car. So he starts walking up to the car. He indicated that he got as close as the C pillar, which is the pillar between the driver's seat and the passenger seat. He could not see anybody in the vehicle other than the driver. And as soon as he got to that location, the driver took off, the driver being Paul Vinson. So Deputy Braun's standing outside of his squad. He has to run back to his squad, jump in. Deputy McManigal's still positioning his squad behind him. And this is where it picks up, Your Honor. This is the pursuit of Paul Vincent following this traffic stop. Again, no direct contact is ever made with him. He never got to talk to him, get his driver's license, gather any information. He's walking up to the car and the defendant takes off. We're going to play this. It's a duration of about 2 minutes. Are we having a computer problem? It's going, okay, there we go. The defendant's vehicle just went through the intersection with Elmhurst Road, failed to stop for a stop sign at that location. Just went through the intersection with Maple Avenue, failed to stop for a stop sign at that location. And now approaching the crash scene near the town hall. And so, to be clear, Your Honor, the vehicle did not leave the roadway. I know the red dots kind of went off the roadway there, but what was explained to me by the computer experts is that the speed of the vehicle was so fast that the GPS really couldn't keep up like it was doing earlier. The small dots, you had a precise location. Once it got down here, the vehicle was traveling so fast, it went to these larger ranges, say the car or the phone is somewhere in this general location. So the vehicle did not leave the roadway until it got down right near the driveway to the town hall, where it left the roadway and struck a culvert or a ditch, and causing it to flip over. When the deputies caught up, Deputy Braun and Deputy McManigal, unfortunately, when they arrived on scene, the first thing they noticed were 4 people outside of the car, including the 2 young boys, the 2 10-year-old boys who were dead on scene, unfortunately. They saw the driver, Mr. Vincent, who was outside of the vehicle, also disabled by injury. The front seat passenger, victim C, was pinned inside the front seat passenger area, and the victims D and E, the 2 girls, one of them was outside the vehicle. The other one, victim D, who was the 14-year-old niece, the first responders didn't even realize she was in the car at first because she was pinned in the back seat. So they're dealing with the people that are outside, and they could see victim C in the passenger, front passenger, But it wasn't until they started extricating victim C that they realized victim D was pinned inside the back seat area. Next slide, please. This is the speed analysis that was done by the Wisconsin State Patrol based on the airbag control module inside the vehicle. As you can see, 5 seconds before the collision, the vehicle was traveling at a speed of 113.50 miles per hour. 5 seconds before the collision, and only slightly slowed down until right up to the point of impact, but even still at that point, still traveling at 56 miles an hour at the time of the event. The next slide I'm going to show is just I just want to warn the court and others that this will show, there's nothing overly graphic, but this will show the crime scene shortly after the first responders arrived and the individuals that were outside the vehicle. So on the right, there's a police deputy. Near the foot of the deputy on the right is victim C. After she had been peeled out, the front windshield had to be peeled back. She was removed from the car so they could render aid. The 2 boys are laying there, and then over on the left is the officers tending to one of the other girls. So very violent, horrific crime scene, Your Honor. This is the next day. This is what the vehicle looked like in daylight after, obviously, the passengers had been removed and the vehicle was found on its side like this. That's the final resting position, and you can see the large gouge mark in the grass below the vehicle. That's where, just below that, not on the picture, but is the culvert, and that's where the point of impact was. That's what the car looked like later at the police garage. Inside the vehicle, Your Honor, after a search warrant was performed on the vehicle, this weapon was found. This was in the trunk of the car. This is a Glock 9mm handgun. Remarkable is the fact that it has an extended magazine clip. I believe it held 30 rounds. That was found to have 26 rounds in the magazine and 1 round in the chamber. Also, I'd like to point out that this handgun had been modified. If you could go to the next slide, please. So that's just showing the rounds in the extended clip. And then at the top, on the right side of the photo, is the back plate of the barrel of the gun, showing that it had been modified. That silver piece on the right side of the photo is the item or the device known as a Glock switch, which it's my understanding that the firearm is modified, the barrel is modified to remove the manufacturer's back plate, and that device is inserted. It's simply a metal rod inserted into the back end of the barrel so that the trigger cannot or does not reset on its own, making it semi-automatic. The trigger stays in an open position, making it an automatic fire, which is obviously illegal. And Mr. Vincent, as a convicted felon, had no business possessing any type of firearm whatsoever. And then finally, this was the marijuana that was found in the trunk of the car. This is 172 grams of marijuana, or about 6 ounces. The information from the investigation revealed that this was a day trip that Mr. Vincent and victim C had set out from Milwaukee along with 3 of the children, traveling to Minnesota that day to pick up his other son who lived in Minnesota. And really can't think of a reason why Mr. Vincent would need to take 6 ounces of marijuana and a fully automatic handgun with him in this car on a day trip to Minnesota to pick up his 10-year-old son for Christmas vacation. But that's what he had in his car after a search of the events. So, Your Honor, I wanted to share these things with you because it obviously makes this a very aggravated case. I want you to please consider the aggravating facts here, Your Honor, and I want you to please take note of the fact that this was not an accident. I heard it described that way. I've seen it written that way. I've heard people refer to it that way. This was not an accident. This was a violent collision. And this wasn't a mistake by Mr. Vinson. This was willful, volitional conduct on his part. He made a series of choices. First of all, to attempt to elude police in the first place. Well, first of all, let's back up to the fact that he's got 4 children in the back seat of a car with seating for 3, restraints for 3. But it really didn't matter how many restraints were in the back seat because he had 0 children seatbelted in the back of that car as he's traveling at 100 miles an hour, as he's high or under the influence of marijuana, as he's being chased by police. These are all conscious decisions on his part. This wasn't a mistake or an accident. An accident suggests that this was unavoidable or perhaps maybe simple negligence by a human being making a mistake. That's not what this was. That's not what this was. This was selfish conduct. This was him trying to avoid an arrest. He already had a warrant out for his arrest. He had charges pending in Milwaukee County. He had the pursuit that happened 43 days earlier in Waukesha County. Had not yet been charged, but they were investigating him. It just is a series of willful conduct on his part that led to the death of these 2 boys and the significant injuries to the other passengers in his car. He doesn't have a driver's license. He's never had a driver's license. He's had 10 or 12 convictions for driving without a valid license or driving after suspension. It's meaningless to him. He just keeps driving. 4 prior times he was cited and convicted for driving around with his children not in proper restraints. 4 prior times. It meant nothing to him. Smoking marijuana, driving with kids in the car without seatbelt. This was easily avoidable, Judge, easily predictable, unfortunately. Anybody could look at this set of circumstances and say, oh my goodness, somebody's going to be seriously hurt or killed when you add all this up. And so I understand his family and friends portray him as a good father, but a good father doesn't do that. A good father doesn't put their young children in the back of a car with no seatbelt, smoke marijuana, and then drive 100 miles an hour. It's just that simple. And he has done nothing since this case has been charged but try and get himself out of trouble. And that's detailed in the letter that I filed with court, all these lies and deception and trying to blame the 14-year-old child, trying to blame others for their, for his involvement in this crime so that he can get off the hook, so that he doesn't have to sit in jail. It's despicable. His character is low. His prior history, Your Honor, begins with juvenile adjudication for possession of a dangerous weapon by a person under the age of 18. That was back in 2010. 2013, he was charged with a misdemeanor for possession of marijuana. Eventually got amended down to a ticket. Also in 2013, another misdemeanor possession of THC charge and misdemeanor bail jumping, sentenced to 15 days jail. 2014, possession of THC, second offense, 120 days jail, stayed for 18 months probation. He did not successfully complete that probation. That's the only probation that I could see on his record. He couldn't do it. 2019 and 2020, he was charged with domestic incidents involving victim C. Both cases were dismissed. And then, as I've highlighted in my letter, he has the Waukesha County case. He has a case pending in Milwaukee County for possession of a firearm by a felon. That case apparently went to a motion hearing recently and is awaiting decision there, but he certainly was on bail. Well, I take it back. His bail had been revoked because he missed court. He missed court repeatedly in Milwaukee County. He was out on a, or not out, but there was a felony warrant out for him for missing court on that charge. So, Your Honor, he has shown repeated unwillingness to comply with the requirements of the law. Bail is meaningless to him. Court orders, you're a convicted felon, you shouldn't possess a firearm. That's meaningless to him. He's had repeated or contact with the criminal justice system for marijuana-related offenses, including this one. He told the PSI writer that he was selling marijuana to make a living. He has no employment history whatsoever. No indication that he was supporting these children financially in any fashion. The vehicle was inspected following the collision. There was no mechanical defaults with the vehicle, so no reason to have that creep into your mind that maybe there was a problem with the brakes or the steering or the accelerator. Nothing like that. It's just a highly aggravated case every way you look at it, Judge. The actual pursuit lasted just under 3 miles, and again, speeds over 100 miles an hour. So for all these reasons, Your Honor, we are advocating for a lengthy prison sentence. Now, I realize he has not been sentenced to prison before, but this case is so serious, the consequence is so serious, the outcome so serious, and the need to protect the public. As I've mentioned, the lengths that he would go to avoid being held accountable in this case are really quite concerning if this is a person who would be out in the community and to be trusted in the community. So we are advocating for a 30-year sentence of initial confinement, 20 years of extended supervision for a total sentence of 50 years. That's not the maximum, Judge. We're not asking for the maximum, but it's darn close, and I recognize that, and that's because of the need to protect the public and the seriousness of the crime. There is a high degree of concern for the surviving children. We don't have a great deal of information, frankly, about their condition, but they both suffered significant head injuries, brain injuries. Both required hospitalization for weeks and months. Certainly there will be long-term consequences, probably life-altering consequences. I believe there's an indication that for the 14-year-old niece, she did not lose her arm entirely, but lost use of it. So for a 14-year-old girl to have to go through life like that, certainly these individuals suffered great bodily harm, and that's just the physical, not to mention the emotional and mental health or mental well-being of these children based on what they've seen and what they experienced that night at the hands of this defendant. So I ask you, Your Honor, to strongly consider these factors, and again, Mr. Vinson needs to be punished for his role in this. This was completely avoidable from the start. I understand that the mother of victim B is on Zoom. She has written a letter, and she has asked that our victim witness advocate who's in court, Ms. Peterson, be allowed to read it into the record for her if that's agreeable with the court.
Certainly. Ms. Peterson.
Thank you.
Give my deputy a moment to bring you a microphone.
So as indicated, this is from the mother of victim B. She writes, "This is hard to write because I'll rather be in person saying this so you can see every emotion in my face. But sadly, I'm still a mom and have a daughter that I have to be there for that's still grieving due to what you did. I would never have thought in a million years you'd be this selfish, and the fact you sit there looking like you have no remorse for killing your sons, that's the most selfish thing you could have ever did. Why? Over something petty, you took 2 lives, children who were loved. I trusted you with my son, and you know how I feel about him after I didn't want him to go to mess up his school perfect attendance. But the look I seen in his face when he said, 'Mama, can I please go be with my brother?' I allowed him to go, but I would have never thought he wouldn't have made it back home to me safe without being hurt how I sent him to you. You're wrong, and I'll never forgive you. I don't care who forgave you. When you know me and you know one thing I never played about was my children, and he's not here, Paul. Do you understand that I cry every single day? I wake up every single night I go to sleep because I can't hear or see my kid anymore. You traumatized me, and the fact you're trying to do everything in your power to even get out is beyond me. You would think you would tell them, give me life. I don't deserve to live because I took not one, but 2 of my children's life. I don't feel he deserves 30 years. I feel he needs more than that, because what's the point? He'll get out and live his life when, again, not 1 but 2 of his kids are gone. That wasn't a mistake or accident. It was a choice you made to put your children in harm while killing 2. I don't feel it's fair. He needs more than that. He needs to suffer how me and my family suffer every day. How my son's friends still call me, text me crying every day about my kid. He was supposed to graduate this year and couldn't be there to attend with the other kids because his father, his selfish father, took his life. You disappointed my kid. He's never coming back, and he couldn't wait to be a teenager, couldn't wait to be grown enough to take care of his mom. He loved my whole life, and you knew that he promised me I wouldn't have to work again or be tired because he was going to make sure he took care of me, and you took him away, and I hate you for that. You're not a good person, so don't sit there and look like one, and whoever on your side is against me. I'm going to stand for my children by any means, because in my eyes, he would want you to get life. How are you comfortable still being here? You're wrong. There's no right. This was no accident. This was your actions, your selfish actions. You thought the first high-speed chase you went on with your other kids in the car was cool. Also, and maybe thought this one would be the same outcome. But you took those boys' lives. There's no coming back from that. He simply needs more time. And I'll keep saying it over and over, because if he's out to live his life, that's all I gotta say. I hope everyone understands the pain the mothers feel, and siblings and family members, and look more into this. He needs more time. I'll never get over this, and I'll never forgive him. I'm angry. I had to change up what I'm saying, because if you can hear the hurt in my voice every day, or what I really wanted to say, I promise you it wouldn't be nothing, and I mean nothing nice. Sincerely, the mother of victim B.
Ms. Opera, anything else?
The only thing I wanted to say, Your Honor, is there is restitution that's requested. The Crime Victim Compensation Board did pay out a claim, and the amount is $4,947.61. That information was provided to Attorney Hughes previously, so we would request that he be ordered to pay that back to the CVC. Thank you.
Mr. Hughes?
Paul Vinson is going to have to live with what he did for the rest of his life. What he did was horrendous, despicable, and he knows it. On that day in December last year, about a year ago, Mr. Vinson chose to flee from the police with the children in his vehicle. He did so out of fear of the police, and more so out of fear of going to jail because he had a firearm, marijuana, and a warrant. When he did this, he was high on marijuana and not thinking clearly. Marijuana led to increased paranoia and inhibited his ability to think clearly. He admitted to police immediately to having marijuana in his system. After the crash occurred, Mr. Vinson wasn't shocked. He was dealing with the death of his 2 kids that he caused, amongst other injuries to his family. He himself was hospitalized for days and severely injured. He got out of the hospital and was transported to jail, where he could not help the family he still had left. He was trying everything he could do to get out of jail, and he made more desperate decisions while in jail in his attempt to get out. He lied and tried to fabricate a scheme to get out. He was desperate and selfish. Just like the crash, his actions over the last year were incredibly selfish. However, over the last year, the reality of what has happened and what he did is set right now. He ultimately decided to plead guilty to the offense, and he has admitted to his role. He feels incredible remorse for what he did. You're going to see that as he speaks and gives his statement, and you're going to see that, and you saw that as the PSI writer noted. Today, this court is tasked with a difficult decision. This court has to impose a sentence. You have to impose a sentence on a man who unintentionally, but severely recklessly, was involved in the deaths of his 2 sons. A man whose only prior convictions before this are for possession of THC. So in terms of a sentence, I am asking this court to impose 10 years initial confinement and 30 years extended supervision, broken up in whatever way the court wishes. As this court makes this decision, I want to tell you a little bit about Paul. Paul was born in Gary, Indiana, and moved to Milwaukee a month later. He is the youngest of 4 kids. He has a sister, Rico and Paula, and a brother, Curtis. His parents were married for 25 years and divorced in 2017. That marriage was on and off, and his father was serving a lot of time away on military leave. As discussed in the PSI, his childhood was challenging. His family struggled with poverty and residential instability. Paul also suffered from his own physical abuse at the hands of one of his mother's boyfriends. He also suffered from his own sexual abuse, as discussed in the PSI. His own use of marijuana began at an early age. His mother used marijuana his whole life, and that use passed on to him. He started using marijuana at 11 years old. He has continued to use marijuana almost daily until his arrest. He has those 2 prior marijuana convictions. He was on marijuana when this incident happened. He has never had any drug treatment before, and I do think he does need some treatment to help him deal with his marijuana addiction. He also has never had any mental health treatment to deal with the own abuse that he received. Obviously, he's going to need a lot of mental health treatment if he ever wants to have some kind of life going forward. Despite all these negatives, Paul has been able to make a lot of positives out of his life. He has a longtime girlfriend named Deja. He started his own business with her where they were making around $2,000 a week. He also was employed at a logistics company. He's the father to 4 children. He was the father to 4 children. He played a big role in his children's lives. The PSI writer noted that he was an active father and deeply involved in his children's lives. Both Destiny and Deja talk about how big of a role Paul had played in the lives of his kids. Destiny specifically noted he was a good dad minus the accident. She said if my son was still alive today, he would speak highly of his dad and want to be with him. Paul also has a lot of support in the community, as the court can see by all those in the courtroom today. The court also knows this because of all the letters of support I have submitted in the last weeks showing their support in Paul, even though he did this awful thing. His father, Curtis, is a military veteran with a master's degree. His father, Curtis, noted that Paul is an overall good person who is incredibly generous. He noted that Paul is going to need counseling. His mother, Christine, is also a great source of support for him, and they have regular contact. I did submit letters of support from both those individuals. The surviving victims also support him. Victim C, Deja, wrote a letter of support wanting him to be released. Victim D also wrote a letter of support talking about Paul's good character. Paul feels incredible remorse for what he did. When I was meeting with Paul to go over the PSI with him, I was not able to fully get through it with him due to how much struggle he was having in terms of the pain that this has caused him and the remorse he feels. So now this court has to make a very tough decision. Again, I am respectfully asking for 10 years initial confinement with 30 years extended supervision. Paul is 30 years old, and his only prior convictions are for possession of THC. This will be his first prison sentence. Paul will bear the guilt of what he did for the rest of his life. Nothing will bring back his kids. Paul wishes he could go back every day and take back what happened. He is truly sorry for what he did. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Vinson, did you wish to say anything today, sir?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Slowly and clearly.
I want to start off by apologizing to JC and Destiny. I know what I did was wrong and it was selfish. And then the day they go past that I don't think about how I should have did it differently. I lost the only 2 sons that I have. My first 2 born kids, and y'all lost y'all only 2 first sons, only sons. So I can only imagine how much pain I put y'all through. I hope today that with this sentence, that brings everybody closure. And I also want to apologize to the courts for prolonging it for so long and not coming to jail on the first day and admitting to what I did and taking the plea a lot sooner. But in reality, the reason why it was so hard for me to do that is because it's hard to know that I'm the reason why my sons are not here anymore, you know? Pleading guilty to something like that, it take a lot out of the person, and I just didn't have the courage to do it at first. And I got to view the letter that was presented to the courts when I just got here. And it says all of the things that I was saying on the phone when I first got here, and I admit to every last one of them. But the reason behind it is just a little different. When I first came to jail, and I grieved about what I did, I started to try to find any kind of light in what was going on. I just didn't want a year to pass and people forget who my sons was and what they meant to me and what they meant to everybody else. So I started thinking of ways to keep their name, remembered. So I'm thinking I should write a book or I should do something so that way 20 years from now, 30 years from now, people will be able to read and they'll be able to know about Paul and Zapolion Vincent. And I also want to apologize to Deja, my daughter, but she's not here, and my niece, Unique, the other victims that was on the case. And once again, what I did was selfish, and I wish I'd have just met my fate and kept the car part. It's just something I'm gonna have to live with for the rest of my life. I know it's the state's job to prove in some kind of way that I'm a monster and I don't have feelings about the only two sons that I had. And what the letter doesn't say is how many days I cried on the phone, or how many times I got put on suicide watch because I wanted to take my own life. It doesn't say none of those things at all. It doesn't say how they ran in my cell and they found over 15 pills that I wanted to take, that I was plotting on taking. Asking my girlfriend on the phone how many of them would be enough. It doesn't say those things because it's the state's job to prove that I'm a monster and I don't care. And I don't have feelings, but I do have feelings. But I just wanted to end it at, I understand that jail is supposed to be a punishment and jail is supposed to be rehabilitation. But I promise you, Judge, I'm punished. Regardless of what sentence you give me, I'm going to have to deal with this for the rest of my life. I'm punished. I am punished. And that's all I wanted to say.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Vinson, for your comments and helping me understand a little more about your thought process. I appreciate that you admitted to the things the state highlighted in their letter to me. As I read it, it was quite shocking, and I appreciate you taking ownership of that. With that, I'm going to ask for a brief recess. There's a lot here for me to consider, so give me about 5-10 minutes to put together what I think to be an appropriate sentence. I don't.
got it printed out, you can have this. Sure,
Let's go away.
that's yours. You can take that. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, do
And
you
then I
need
think he said-
victim B's name?
It's
Or sorry, sorry, the mother.
The
of victim
mother
B.
is, I think he said JC or, but it's, yeah. Yeah, okay, so the mother is, I don't know if he said JC or, her name is Jacia, just, how do you pronounce it?
I heard of JC.
HCIA is. And then the other mother is Destiny. He said JC and Destiny is what I heard.
Yeah, you know how to spell destiny.
Sure.
Pick up dog food. Well, we can go shopping Wednesday. We can go shopping Wednesday. I'm here Wednesday.
I think they're just on. They don't turn. Well, I think they can see it, but they don't turn the screen. Oh, they're not going to test it.
I'll text you and tell me how.
I got it.
Is it on mute now? The only one we can hear? Ma, you're not muted. No, how? How do I mute? Look at the bottom of your screen. Everybody hear me? Yeah, we did. Okay, look at the bottom. I don't see nothing at the bottom of my screen. Everybody see it. You need to unmute and start to do all that. Who's cussing? That's what this is. No, I can't see the mute. Y'all mute. Okay, I found it. Wait, I think I found it. Right there.
So I put together a criminal sentence. I am guided by the Supreme Court, which gives me 3 objectives with a criminal sentence. The first is rehabilitation of the defendant. That means giving the defendant the tools to keep himself out of trouble going forward. The second objective is deterrence. I need to deter Mr. Vincent as well as others from this kind of conduct. The third objective is punishment. Candidly, everything I'm going to do here today is a punishment, but it needs to be a punishment that matches the seriousness of the offense, which gets into my sentencing factors, the things that weigh on those objectives. The first one being just that, the seriousness of the offense, the severity of the offense. Second thing I get to consider when I put together my sentence is the defendant's character. And then finally, the third thing I get to consider is risk to the community. I really don't know where to begin. There's a lot of stuff here to comment on and make a part of my decision here today. I'm going to start with some of the things in regards to the defendant's character. Mr. Vincent, one of the things you mentioned is writing a book and doing a book so that you could, I guess I'll use my words, perpetuate the memory of your children so that their names aren't forgotten a year after they have left us. I would implore upon you the importance of talking about why you are where you are. And whether you decide that you want to, all right, the people that are on Zoom, they can't hear me now because someone started talking and I had to mute the courtroom. Just bear with me a minute. There's a countdown that occurs to make it turn on, so just bear with me a minute. There we go. It's back on. All right, so those that are on Zoom, please keep yourself muted, otherwise I will remove you from the Zoom hearing. Okay, so what I was trying to get to you, Mr. Vincent, is imploring upon you, convincing others of the dangers of drugs, and I guess I'll say the drug culture, having an automatic weapon, things of that nature that, frankly, in my opinion, and I think perhaps from some of the comments I heard from your attorney, you even admit, starting use of marijuana at age 11. Nobody should be smoking anything at age 11, let alone a controlled substance like marijuana. And here you are, several decades later, I can't do the math in my head, but nonetheless, nonstop use from age 11 until you got arrested about a year ago. And then you have these psychological issues. No surprise, marijuana does affect people's brains, especially when you're using it in those formative years of your teenage years and even pre-teen years. I hope you take this as an opportunity to educate others as to just how harmful it is and what it did to you and your life. I do appreciate as well that was highlighted by Mr. Hughes that you immediately admitted the fact that you were under the influence at the time of the accident. I think that allows the law enforcement officers to get focused on a cause after they take care of those that are injured. They're able to start investigating, and they had that information, and they were able to start focusing specifically on what perhaps motivated or what caused that accident. Also, as I consider your sentence, I am not blind to the fact that you lost your 2 children. Something that you highlighted extensively in your comments, that you lost your 2 oldest, that you lost your 2 boys, and for the rest of your life, you're going to have to remember them. And frankly, I'm guessing on a daily basis, when you wake up, when you go to sleep, it's going to be something that you think about how you took those young boys' lives. With that, let's talk about the severity of this offense. First of all, the most obvious thing is that we have 4 people that were seriously injured, 4 children that were seriously injured, if I have this correct in my head, 2 of which were obviously killed. But this niece who lost control of her arm and the boys, this was, as stated by Ms. Opper, this was all very predictable and frankly easily avoidable. The fact that you had been stopped several times, 4 prior times for seatbelt violations for these children, but yet here you were once again on a long road trip. You had no safety seats. You did not have enough seatbelts for these children. Assuming you were just going to speed limit, 70 miles an hour, and a drive from Minneapolis in November, I can't even think of the number of deer that you drove by that could have easily jumped out in front of you and caused an accident, and those kids would have been at serious risk of being injured. But yet you didn't do anything about that, let alone the conscious decision you made to go 113 miles an hour on a 2-lane road with those children in your vehicle, not seatbelted, not in safety seats, not in booster seats, whatever is appropriate for those children. I know one was 14, so she was probably big enough not to be in a safety seat, but nonetheless was not belted. That's incredibly reckless, and frankly, I think the severity is nearly off the scales, which gets to this next issue, which is the fact that you're fleeing an officer. That's something that's occurring all too often in this community and frankly in this part of the state. People are fleeing officers, and on a weekly basis, at least in this and neighboring counties, somebody's being killed by someone fleeing an officer. Whether they kill themselves or they kill somebody that they hit, it's happening all too often, and frankly, the legislature, recognizing it over this past summer, has increased the fines for fleeing an officer. That's not even something that you pled to, but nonetheless, it is something that certainly I'm considering and talks about the severity of what you were doing that evening, which is fleeing an officer at 113 miles an hour, simply because, and using your own words, because you had a gun, you had a warrant, and you had some drugs. Instead of you facing the music, as it were, for those, we now have 2 children that are dead and 2 others injured. Risk to the community. I understand this argument of your attorney that you basically just have 2 prior THC convictions, but criminal behavior, that you were selling drugs, that you had that weapon presumably to protect your occupation. But I also look at the fact that just a month prior, 43 days prior, you fled an officer. It sounds like, at least from the letter that we got from victim B, that the kids were perhaps in the vehicle at that time. Again, this just shows a increase in behavior that frankly shows that you are a risk to this community. All right, before I hand down the sentence, defense any objection to the $4,947.61 to the Crime Victim Compensation Fund?
No.
Court will order restitution as requested. What are you looking at for credit time, Mr. Hughes?
I have 334 days from December 20th, 2023 to the debt.
State any objection on 334 days credit.
No, Your Honor.
The court will give the defendant 334 days credit towards count 13, which is, count 13 is firearm by a felon. Let's talk about conditions of extended supervision. Conditions of extended supervision is the defendant will undergo an AOD assessment, follow through with any treatment as recommended. The court will also order absolute sobriety with random urinalysis. No use of possession of alcohol or any controlled substances without a valid prescription, including no possession of drug paraphernalia. All prescription drugs are to be taken only in manner in which they're prescribed. Your probation agent needs to know about those prescriptions. You're not to use, possess any CBD products. You're to follow through with any other assessments, evaluations, treatment, and counseling recommended by the agent, full-time employment and/or schooling. I think a criminal thinking course makes sense as well. Defendant is not to associate with any known drug users or dealers, and no contact at any place where illegal drugs are purchased, used, storage, packaged, or distributed. I understand that the defendant has some mental health concerns. I will also order mental health psychological evaluation and then follow through with treatment as deemed appropriate. No operation of motor vehicle without a license, and no possession of any dangerous weapons, no knives, firearms, tasers, pepper spray, things of that nature. And then as stated, the restitution as ordered. Additionally, Mr. Vinson, you have been convicted of several felonies. As such, you're not allowed to own or possess a firearm the rest of your life unless you're able to get a pardon from the governor. Additionally, you lose your voting privileges for the duration of the sentence, which again, on count 3, I am going to give the, 13, excuse me. I'm going to give the defendant a maximum sentence for that. The defendant had a prior firearms conviction, and additionally, he was out on bail for firearms. As such, I am going to sentence him to 5 years initial incarceration, 5 years extended supervision. In regards to count 15, this is injury by use of a vehicle with controlled substances for victim E. I wish I had the names of these victims. I know some of them are minors, as such I probably would not read them, but nonetheless, I'm going to sentence the defendant 2.5 years of initial confinement, 5 years of extended supervision. For count 16, this is for the injury to victim D. I'm going to order another 2.5 years initial incarceration, 5 years of extended supervision. Again, that's for injury by use of motor vehicle with controlled substances in system. In regards to count 17, this is victim A. I will sentence the defendant 10 years initial confinement, 7 years of extended supervision. And then finally for victim B, as requested by the mother, I am going to give a max sentence, 15 years initial incarceration, 10 years extended supervision. Those are consecutive to each other, consecutive to anything else. I will not make the defendant eligible for any programming. With that, anything else the state needs me to address today?
15 years and I didn't catch the probation.
No, Judge, thank you.
Mr. Hughes?
1 second, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. No, Your Honor.
All right. With that, Mr. Vincent, if you think I made any mistakes here today, you have 20 days to put the court on notice of your intent to appeal. Please stand adjourned.